Hey guys, I'm back with our next science lesson. We are still talking about the same standard. This is the L.15.1, which is classification of animals. Sorry, my lighting in here is awful. I've got a bad glare. And we're going to focus today on vertebrates versus invertebrates. Remember, a vertebrate is an animal with an internal skeletal system. So think about the word vertebrae, which are those bones that go stacked together to create a backbone. So is it an animal with a backbone or an animal without a backbone? So an animal with a spine or an animal without a spine. And we're going to talk about some examples and some key questions to ask yourself if you're kind of unsure of if it's a vertebrate or an invertebrate. So remember that N means not. So does it have a backbone or does it not have a backbone? Okay, so we're going to jump right into it. This is going to be a shorter lesson. I'm hoping to keep it less than 10 minutes, and I'm pretty sure I can do that pretty easily. So first I want to give you some examples of vertebrates. Remember, I told you before in our first science lesson that most of the animals, if I were to say, hey, list animals, you would start listing animals. You would say, sharks, penguins, kangaroos, snakes. Pretty much most of the things you would list are going to be vertebrates because those are some of the animals that come to mind first. The invertebrates are the ones that aren't as cute, aren't as interesting to us usually, although they are every animal super interesting. But for the most part, those animals that you list in your head are going to be vertebrates. Okay? Invertebrates, we're going to talk about what those are specifically. But just really quickly, I'm going to give you some examples of invertebrates. Okay? So I have some pictures here. Some of it got cut off, sorry. Technology is fun when you try and print things from your phone. It decides it doesn't want to print the whole thing. So this is the biggest category of invertebrates. Most of the animal population on land, on Earth, are going to be insects and arthropods, bugs. Okay, I classify all of that under bugs. So those are your butterflies, your bees, your dragonflies, your mosquitoes, your lightning bugs, your grasshoppers, your crickets, mosquitoes, snails, slugs, all of that kind of stuff are going to be invertebrates. So think about anything creepy crawly, okay? Next, this whole middle section here is about worms. You have flatworms, roundworms, and then what they call segmented worms. So like this guy here is your typical earthworm, or if you go fishing, a wiggler, right? So worms, invertebrates, okay? Think about your animals that you don't think of as animals that live in the ocean. We have a few examples. Sea urchins, starfish, sea sponges. There's some sea sponges up here. That's a fish. I don't know why they put a picture of a fish. They could have just told you those are sea sponge, but they wanted to make sure you understood that's a sea sponge. So they are considered animals. They are animals. And they have a whole body system that classifies them as animals, but they are invertebrates. They do not have an internal skeleton. Okay, so insects, bugs, creepy crawlies, spiders, all of that kind of stuff, invertebrates. Worms, invertebrates. Your hard underwater things like sand dollars, what are they called again? Starfish, sea urchins, sea sponges, invertebrates. And then the other two are going to be your really squishy underwater stuff. So that's things like your jellyfish and octopus, squid, and then so these guys are called stinging cell animals. So that is a if you've watched Finding Nemo, is what Nemo can't say. Sea anemone, right? And then down here you have your mollusks, which are your octopus, your squids, and then the ones that your parents might like to eat that come in shells, clams, scallops, mussels, oysters. Those are going to be mollusks, and they're super squishy. Octopus, super squishy. Squid, super squishy. If you guys came to the Gross Out Science Night last year, I was working the table where we got to dissect a squid. Super squishy. So those are all examples of invertebrates. So pretty much everything else has a skeletal system on the inside of their body, and they are vertebrates. They have a backbone. So the example of those would be your fish, your birds, your amphibians, your reptiles, and your mammals, which we're going to go in depth on each of these over the next few days. Okay, we're going to spend one day on each of these. But all of the stuff you name, like we talked about sharks, there's a chameleon, there's an alligator, really blurry picture, sorry about that, guys. I don't know what this guy is, apparently some kind of amphibian. I'll have to look it up, but I'm not quite sure. But I know there's like a salamander, frog, or toad. Your birds, whether they fly like a macaw, or if they don't, like a penguin or an ostrich, we talked about that, some sort of falcon. And then your mammals, which are, I think that's a pangolin. Those are pretty interesting animals. You have a kangaroo, a bat, a manatee, a mouse, an elephant, and your reptiles, alligator, lizards, turtles, snakes. Those all have internal skeletal systems. They all have a backbone. They all have vertebrae. They're vertebrates. Okay? So that should make most of that clear on what's a vertebrate and what's an invertebrate. But I do want to give you guys some questions to kind of think through. So if somebody were to say, oh, is that a vertebrate or an invertebrate? Your first question should be, do I know if it has a skeleton? Does it have a skeleton inside of its body, bones and stuff? If the answer is yes, it's a vertebrate. Okay? If you're like, oh, I don't know. Move on to the next one. Is it really squishy? Is it like a slug or a snail or a jellyfish? Is it super squishy, like a worm? If it is super squishy, it's probably an invertebrate. If it's not, then it might not be an invertebrate. That means you just need to think about everything else. Which takes us to the last one, because you think about, like, spiders aren't really squishy. Beetles aren't really squishy. When I think of a ladybug, I don't think of something that's real squishy. It's kind of hard. Is it a bug? Because if it's a bug, it's an invertebrate. Bugs, invertebrate. Okay? Super squishy, probably an invertebrate. Has a skeleton, vertebrate. Okay, so these are your questions. You need to kind of filter these examples through your head. So if you come up with an example of an animal and you're just like, oh goodness, is it a vertebrate or an invertebrate? So think about like a butterfly. Do they have a skeleton on the inside? I don't know. Is it really squishy? No, it's not really squishy. Oh, is it a bug? Yes, as beautiful as butterflies can be, they're bugs. So that would make it an invertebrate. So that's just basically all I have. I wanted to show you examples, and I wanted to give you these questions to kind of filter examples through. Okay, so to think those through, you may want to write these down. And then, of course, I need to give you a quick check for understanding. I have 1 minute and 2 seconds to do that because I told you I was going to keep it under 10 minutes. So your check for understanding is going to be, give me an example of a vertebrate and an example of an invertebrate that I did not show you, that's not on these pictures. Okay? So that's upside down. So not one of these. An example of a vertebrate has a skeleton, has a backbone, and an example of an invertebrate does not have a skeleton inside of its body, does not have a backbone. So one example of a vertebrate, one example of an invertebrate. And go ahead and make sure you comment on Dojo, or you can even comment on the video, the YouTube video if you want. All right, I have 15 seconds to get out of here. Thank you guys. I will see you again soon. Keep it up. I miss you. Do great. Bye.